Okay, welcome. I'm trying it a little bit different for this weekly video. PowerPoints are fine, but I wasn't in love with them. Today, we're going to be talking about this little phenomenon we call civic republicanism. Okay, so remember, we have different theory families. Classical liberalism and modern liberalism is one important theory family. It was huge around the revolution and influenced the Constitution. The other one that was big at the time was what we call civic republicanism. Okay, so this video is going to give you the basics and intro to civic republicanism. Now, you remember, right? Uh, like I said with John Locke's like top five most important philosopher of all time. Well, civic republicanism, big surprise, also goes back to a real important guy. In this case, Aristotle. I hope you've heard of him. He's a dead Greek dude, right? But he lived in the golden age of Athens. He was Plato's student. Plato had been Socrates' student. Aristotle disagreed with almost everything that Plato said, but that's neither here nor there. Aristotle is incredibly important, just historically speaking, for political philosophy, and then specifically what we're going to call civic republicanism. So it's one of the oldest political ideologies or political theories out there. Let's see. From Aristotle, we'll just say Greeks. It then went to the Romans. From the Romans, it went to the Christians. This think Middle Age. Okay, so Saint Thomas Aquinas, Saint Augustine, all of those guys. Okay. After the Romans, the Christians kind of added in some Bible, right, and kind of meshed that into civic republicanism. After the Christians, it has a big, real burst in the Renaissance. So starting in Italy, roughly 1400, 1450 or so, Machiavelli is a Renaissance era civic Republican. He's more than just a civic Republican. He's really important, but he's in this same box. In the Renaissance, they took the Christian stuff out. So they took the Bible back out of it, but some people were still doing that. And then from the Renaissance, it went to Britain. And from Britain, it came to USA. Okay? So directly, this is the direct connection for America. And as you'll see through this lecture, through this series of lectures, a lot of what we were doing in the United States was modeled off of the British system. And in those cases, there's a pretty heavy civic Republican influence as well, though, John Locke was British, right? He's a classical liberal. Remember the liberal sort of like primary assumption, right? Respect due to being endowed with reason. Civic Republicans are like, okay, reason, whatever, it's fine. Don't get me wrong. It's not like they don't like reason. But they're like, that's not what's really important. This is what Aristotle said. Man is a political animal, okay? So you remember that liberal assumption of like, John Locke's like, oh, there's like society, and then like, now we're born and now we're going to go to politics, yay, right? Like, civic Republicans are like, you never have society without politics. Society and politics are the same. You don't get to just like one day start to have politics. Like, come on, John Locke, you got to be kidding me, okay? So this is the primary assumption that civic Republicans are working on. And for the next part of this part of the lecture, I'm going to be explaining to you how this works for them, okay? So let's erase. And I like this version. Doing it on the whiteboard because it looks a little bit more like real life. I think I'm going to get a different whiteboard. It's a little bit bigger. I called my mom. She said she had one. It's a little bit small, and I couldn't get it onto the wall quite easily. So it's maybe not perfect for today, but it's definitely good enough. And it's kind of funny, kind of like pop in. I'm like, hey, guys. But that's okay. So Sometimes this political animal is translated as social animal instead of political. I'll explain why as we kind of go through the lecture. I do prefer political a little bit, but the Christians kind of preferred social because they were reducing the importance of politics and increasing the importance of God and other things like that. But this is basically what Aristotle said. Here you are. You're a family out there, sort of like just this one family unit just kicking around Swiss Family Robinson style, or Little House on the Prairie. Aristotle says this is bad. One family all by itself is going to face all kinds of trouble. What kinds of trouble are you going to have if you're a family? Well, what Aristotle says is this type of association, he says, is incomplete. And his logic here is, if a small group is incomplete, what do you have to do? You have to join together until you reach a group that's big enough where it is complete. What does he mean by complete? He means all the goods necessary to perpetuate a common life through time are secured. Okay? That's what complete means. Write that down. All the goods necessary to secure a common life through time are secured. All the goods necessary to have a common life through time are secured. However you want to put it, right? We're going to talk about what that is, but like, what's the family missing? Well, first and foremost, who are you going to marry your kids to, right? Like, just think about that, right? Like, one family out there, you got a couple kids, they want to have kids, there's no options. So what does Aristotle say? Look, naturally, not by choice, you don't choose, this happens just naturally, okay? Families all live together. And once you have families living together, you formed a bigger thing, a nice big circle there, and we're going to call that society. Okay? But not only is society there, but as I said, you automatically have some kind of mechanism of collective coordination we're going to call government. Okay? So notice how this is just a very different way of thinking than what we saw with John Locke. John Locke agrees. He's like, sure, people have society, I guess, whatever, that's fine. But he doesn't really have this deep sort of kind of scientific, empirical kind of way of thinking about what's happening in a society. And according to Aristotle, government and society, it's not a choice. We're born into it. We're political animals. It's part of our nature, okay? So, Locke, it's like, oh, like join and consent. But like politics is just kind of this weird kind of instrumental thing. To Aristotle, politics is the most important of all human activities, actually, right? What did Locke say? Oh, protect your lives, liberties, and estates, what I call property. And Aristotle was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, we're talking about like preservation through time of an entire community, right? So anyway, so here we go, right? Really important thing that's happening here. And what Aristotle will say something like this. Society is natural, or politics is natural. Can you make that out? I think you can make it out good enough. There might be like a zoom you can do on your screen as well. But society is natural, or politics is natural. Okay. Now let's ask this question. I'll leave that over there. Okay? All the goods necessary to perpetuate a common life through time are secured. Okay? Remember how important that phrase is, okay? All the goods necessary to perpetuate a common life through time are secured. what are the kinds of things we need to secure? Well, I'm doing caps because what about like food and water, right? Those seem kind of important to community, right? To Aristotle, this outside the larger community, that the complete community, was what the Greeks had. They were city-states. Today, they are nation-states. Okay? So to Aristotle, this big group of city-states, a lot of city-states are very common, sort of like cultural formation, historically speaking, but nation-states are what we live in today, okay? So that group is a big group now, right? What do you need? You need food and water, right? Like these are really important things that you need to secure. You need some kind of like defensive army, right? You need an army in case someone tries to invade you, okay? And in fact, the Greeks were really aware of this because they would have wars with each other. And if you lost and your city was razed, they killed the men and sold the women off into slavery. Like this was really huge. You know, this is incredibly important. So food, water, you have to have some kind of defense. Well, you need an economy, right? So that's going to be not just food, but you need commerce, manufacturing, money. So like the government's got to do money and weights and measures. And historically speaking, like weights and measures were one of the most important things governments did because an easy way to scam somebody in the marketplace is you mess with your weights and measures and you can overcharge, right? So the government comes in and like prevents that from happening. So you need an economy, okay? Some kind of laws, right? Laws to keep everybody happy or in their place. Education. Let me ask you this. In order for any community to perpetuate itself through time, these are like the material things you need, right? But ask yourself this question. Do you need good citizens? And by a good citizen, we'll talk about this right now, but by a good citizen, we mean someone who's willing to maybe fight and die for your country, right? Think of Irving Kristol's criticism here now. Irving Kristol doesn't, properly speaking, fit in this box. He's an ultra-conservative. There's a lot of conservative elements of this way of thinking, but there's a lot of liberal or lefty-leaning ones as well, right? So good citizens. Do you need good citizens? Most people tend to say yes. So, next question, what makes a good citizen? How about this? Follows the law, right? Is that big enough? Yeah, it's okay. Follows the law. Participates. That means vote, etc. Okay, so you follow the law, you participate. Respect the rights of others. That seems kind of important, right? Like a really good citizen respects the rights of others. Okay. Follows the law, participates. Well, this is like your minimum. Willing to fight. So as I said, you have to be willing, like classically speaking, go back to the Greeks, this is what democracy looked like in the Greek world. It was this way of understanding, even in Athens. Notice it's called Civic Republicanism, and people are like, oh, America's not a democracy, we're a republic. Well, we're a democratic republic, okay, so whatever. But, we'll explain that. But willing to fight, right? your entire community is going to be at risk if not everyone's willing to go fight. So you've got to be willing to go fight. Willing to fight, what was the other one I wanted to throw up here? Well, there's a technical term that you need to understand. Civic virtue, okay? You gotta like plug this in your brain. Civic virtue are what? They're the qualities of a good citizen. So it's all of these things here. That's the other one that I want to talk about. Follows the law, participates, respects the rights of others, willing to fight. Maybe also something like uphold tradition. You know, it's kind of weird, right? I lectured on John Locke for like 2 weeks. You get 2 weeks on John Locke. Did I say citizenship once? No. Did I say tradition once? No. Did I say, yeah, you get these other ones. So, you know, civic republican and liberalism, you know, they're going to sort of agree on a lot of basic things, but then they have different valuations of certain other things, okay? And civic republicans are much more focused on being a good citizen. Liberals are like, well, yeah, being a good citizen, of course, it's important. That's a good idea, but it's not like the number one thing. Be a good person, you know, use your reason, like these kinds of things. But civic republicans are like, look, man, this is really what it's about. It's all about being a good citizen, okay? Uphold traditions. So let's do a quick, and then I'll end this video. I want to do a quick civic republican keywords, okay? I did this for liberalism. Tradition, right? Why does tradition really matter? I didn't emphasize this enough in this lecture, so I want you to pay really close attention here. Well, look at this thing, the society thing here, right? This is our society thing, and there's government that's already bundled in here. Traditions are those values and practices and things that we carry from generation to generation that give us a continuity, a sense of common identity through time, okay? Traditions are things like Thanksgiving, right? Like, that's a tradition, Thanksgiving. But Thanksgiving, celebrating Thanksgiving, is one of the things that it really means to be an American. And we want to both preserve those traditions and improve upon them. And this is an important distinction between civic republicanism and someone like Irving Kristol. Irving Kristol views culture, and this is a huge problem for him that I really can't stand, but he views culture as something from the past that you're just sort of supposed to bow down to. It kind of just tells you what to do, and there's no adding or fixing or making better. I mean, maybe a tiny little bit, right? But civic republicanism, the best citizens not only uphold their traditions, but they improve upon them, or they even make new ones, right? And so the best citizens, they're upholding tradition, they're continuing it, but it's not just this thing from the past that's imposed upon them. It's actually a creative sort of endeavor. It might be sometimes artists say you want to learn from the masters, right? And then try to expand upon it. That's the basic idea, right? Learn your traditions, but then add to them, make them better. And that's what we're supposed to do, okay? Tradition, huge. Society is natural, right? Or politics, so citizenship. Citizenship is huge, right? Citizenship or civic virtue / civic virtue. That's it. Civic virtue, okay? So these are some of like our main things that like really matter for civic Republicans. I'm going to be adding on to this sort of as we go. So like my next lecture is going to add on a little bit more and add on a little bit more. But I really want you to keep like these key words plugged into your brain and hear Aristotle's analysis of the incomplete smaller groups that then by necessity have to form together into a bigger group. And in contemporary world, it's nation states. For the Greeks, it was city states. Okay, I'll be adding more. I'll be following up on this for